to recognize the vulnerability of those in the informal sector, of those engaging in secure forms of employment, and also in the context of the pandemic, it has underlined the importance of a healthy and safe work environment, because there were essential workers, including those in agriculture, that had to keep up producing even at the worst times of the pandemic, so that we all had food in our plates. So we have seen in the current times the interrelated nature of public health, labor, food security, and climate change, and the importance of addressing decent work deficits related to, as I was saying, safety and health, incomes and wages, access to labor and social protection as well. Okay, so how do we do? What are the next steps we can take? Maybe you can pass. Thank you. Okay. First, I think there is momentum. From what I've heard from my days here in Namibia, is that there is a lot at the moment in terms of policy, in terms of planning and reviews. So there is a lot of momentum also and in this country to trigger the transformative changes and advance towards more revitalized and dynamic rural economies that can offer more and better jobs, especially for the younger generations. I want also to underline that this is a moment where we can take action to make rural areas more resilient, because the context of shocks has underlined the need to stand ready in the case of future shocks might come. And investments will, over time, also make attractive rural areas as places to live and work. But how do we go about it? Right? We've seen it's rather complex. Some key elements that from an ILO perspective we think are important. I will not delve into the coordination because I think there will be a presentation coming, but I just want to echo what has been said and what will be said after about the importance of coordination, policy coherence, and comprehensive and integrated approaches. I recognize as well what has been mentioned in terms of diversity of rural contexts, and I will add to that. Even within a rural context, there is diversity of rural groups. So I second the importance of having diagnostics informed by rural labor statistics that include the measurement of those in informality in the agriculture, so including subsistence farmers, so that we don't miss out to the actual contribution that they are making to the economy, despite of being informality, so that we can offer them the support they need to transition to market-oriented agriculture and to a formal status. Of course, all what we do is anchored in international labor standards and a right-based approach to development. We believe this is key in the future ahead as well. And recognizing that any process of transformation involves deep changes at the economic level, but also at the societal level. We need to put all these discussions and support them with social dialogue. At the ILO, we work on a tripartite basis with governments, employers, and workers' organizations. And we believe this is key to ensure that all voices are heard and nobody is left behind in these deep changes of transformation. Some pointers in terms of where could be the investments. Some sectors have been underlined in terms of those presenting greater potential. I believe that any diagnostic from the point of view of what are sectors that have great job potential need to look at direct, indirect, and induced employment creation, and see also what are the decent work gaps in terms of quality of employment as well, because that can be key also to increase the attractiveness of the sector and to understand also, as we will see, what are the needs in terms of skills. I think there is a lot of potential as well in harnessing the job creation potential in the agri-food sector, and as has been mentioned for the case of Namibia. But also in some rural settings, there might be more potential for jobs in other sectors that are not so closely related to agriculture, and tourism was a clear example in that regard. And improving rural infrastructure, since it's a common denominator for of us in terms of investments, and then there are also approaches that harness the potential in terms of employment. And let me share a couple of examples on this. In terms of tourism, it's important to understand what are the specificities of the sector, what are the challenges in terms of employment. In countries like in Latin America, like Ecuador and Costa Rica, we have supported the actors in the tourism sector. In those countries, tourism is a key sector for the economy, and we have gathered them together to identify, especially in the context of the COVID-19, to sit down and see what could be solutions, concrete solutions, to stand ready for the recovery of the sector and to address problems, employment challenges, these are work deficits that were occurring in the sector. Stakeholders committed to a roadmap of action that identifies also private sector investments, identifies the skills needs, so it's quite comprehensive, and members of the roundtables recognize the priorities and the next steps. So this is a process of dialogue that translates into concrete actions. The second example I wanted to explain to you is associated to improving rural infrastructure and investment. The ILO has a long-standing program of employment-intensive investments in many countries. Let me share this example in Timor-Leste for several reasons. First, well, it's a country that is largely rural and has identified agroforestry as a sector with great potential. But those engaged in the sector expressed the problem in accessing to markets. And one key problem in order for them to access the market was lack of rural roads. With the support of the EU, and in collaboration actually with GIZ, the ILO has been enhancing the market linkages from the communities to the markets, building roads, but doing that harnessing the capacity of the communities, so building the capacity for local contractors and using also local resource-based approaches. So there has been direct employment creation, but also indirect job creation. And lately, in the new phases of this program, they are implementing green approaches and more resilient engineering because they recognize Timor-Leste is also exposed to the climate risks and natural disasters. And the country has adhered to this approach because, in terms of poverty reduction, because in their investment strategy for the next years, 2027, if I remember well, they have embedded this approach as part of their investment strategy. So, as I was saying, there is a lot of potential that can be harnessed by advancing the just transition in rural areas towards greener economies through green job creation. It has been mentioned that there is forestry in Namibia also as a sector. There are a lot of opportunities that can be created through reforestation, afforestation, and other restoration activities. And also there is potential in the blue economy that could refer to fisheries and aquaculture. let me share our recent work and ongoing work here in Namibia that my colleagues in the department are doing on the fisheries supply chain. So the Working Fishing Convention was ratified in Namibia, and as part of our project on sustainable supply chains, we are working on the fisheries supply chain in Namibia, and there have been key results in terms of a diagnostic to understand what is the employment situation in the supply chain, and if, for example, it has shown that there were issues related to gender inequalities or gender segregation in terms of occupations, and also lack of capacity in terms of labor inspection. So there have been a series of activities that have been implemented together with the national partners to advance some sector-specific interventions. In the next steps, we hope that there will be enhanced social dialogue at the sectoral level with the sectoral stakeholders through a national coordination mechanism that will help in advancing some of these bottlenecks that the sector is facing. It has been mentioned before about promoting employment in agriculture and ensuring that it is productive and that it generates sufficient income. I think there is a lot of potential in Namibia. I don't know it as much, but from what I'm hearing and I'm reading, it's time to accelerate and to tap into this potential. In that regard, there is a lot in terms of improving the productivity at the stages of food production. I think it has been mentioned about climate smart agriculture, and I think that's a great direction to go. There are also a lot of opportunities, and it might require small-scale investments at the local community, and perhaps the rural development centers can provide, some basis for that to ameliorate the opportunities in terms of value addition of food production at the local level through agro-processing, through packaging, transportation, and even establishing small market outlets in certain points of the country. So that would involve small-scale investments in terms of infrastructure, but that would have a catalytic effect in terms of job creation and income generation as well.